I know that there's been stories and incidences in the past, like where even I have competed with boys. I've competed with boys in a basketball team.
Okay.
Quite good. Like, I actually learned a lot. They're very fast. But then I got to an age where I was like, I couldn't compete anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? They were just
Right.
stronger, taller,
Faster.
more aggressive.
Yep.
Like it just didn't have it. Right.
Yeah.
So I agree that we can have inclusivity, but I'm just concerned about it being kind of one-sided.
Yes.
And I think it's taking away from women. It's taking away from us being able to be 100%, like what we were fighting for. I think.
Welcome to the Womanhood Lectures. I'm Yasmin.
And I'm Lyra.
Today, guys, we're going to be talking about a very hot topic that is trending, and we are talking about trans athletes. I know many of you will have opinions one way or another. We're just adding our 2 cents today. So we don't have any specific takeaways except for the fact that we have kids. And so if you're a parent, you might be interested in staying and listening to what some of the things are that are happening in sports for your kids. With that, let's start.
Yes, it's a very hot topic.
It is, yeah.
Please don't throw us under the bus. But at the end of the day, we're coming from a perspective where both you and I have daughters.
Yeah. And they're athletes. They play competitive sports.
Yes.
They have played competitive sports, and same with my son.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about it? Like, have you had any run-ins or incidences where someone or a child has come in that is a trans athlete and has competed with your girls at all?
That hasn't actually happened for my kids personally.
Okay.
I know that there's stories about things that are happening sort of at the high school level and college level, particularly in the States.
Yes.
I think that in Ontario, I don't know if there are, it's definitely much more open, and there's a big push for inclusivity.
Okay.
Which
Yes.
I don't disagree with being inclusive. That's, I'm happy to have kids play. I think when kids are really little, there's lots of co-ed sports that kids play. I think that's great. I think that's wonderful. I think it gets tricky when you get into kids that are hitting puberty, that are getting older, and you're seeing a big difference between male and female physiology and body type and strength and that sort of thing. I mean, boys have a higher muscle mass. They have more bone mass. They have, faster muscles in terms of, the firing
that's going. The fire. Yes.
Yeah. You were talking about that with me, and I was like, yeah, that's biology. That's just inherently there, right? Boys have a slightly higher, larger heart.
Yes.
As well as higher hemoglobin. So, I mean, these are all these little things that are actually big things when it comes to competition.
Yes.
Right? We're not talking about kids playing in gym together. We're talking about if your kid is on a competitive volleyball team, how comfortable are you if the other team has a transgender athlete and you're on a girls' team, and that athlete is biologically a boy,
right,
who's playing against your girl?
Yes.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
And that's really the question. Like, is that fair? Is it reasonable? What are some of the things that we can be doing to keep people playing sports, which I totally want?
Right.
Right? We want to include kids, and we want kids to have opportunities, but at the same time, are we robbing opportunities from our girls?
And you notice that it's just girls.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a viewpoint that I kind of come from. I'm very opinionated about this topic. I noticed that there's not a lot of transgender females or females that have become male.
Okay.
Joining male sports. I'm just not seeing it. They're not going to be as competitive, right? So when a male becomes a female, transitions to a female, some of the lingo I'm not perfect with, but when they transition to become a female, they have the advantage over a female.
There is a physical advantage
finding
there.
that as I'm reading into it, I'm watching articles, I'm seeing all of the situations out there. It's a rugby team, it's a girls' rugby team, it's three biological males who are playing on the female team. It's not the reverse that's happening, you know? I know that there's been stories and incidences in the past, like where even I have competed with boys. I've competed with boys in a basketball team.
Okay.
Quite good. Like, you know, I actually learned a lot. They're very fast. But then I got to an age where I was like, I couldn't compete anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? They were just stronger, taller,
faster,
more aggressive.
Yep.
Like it just didn't have it. Right.
Yeah.
So I agree that we can have inclusivity, but I'm just concerned about it being kind of one-sided.
Yes.
And I think it's taking away from women. It's taking away from us being able to be 100%, you know, like what we were fighting for. I think it's almost anti-feminism to even support something like this.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you know, I worry about things like, you know, taking a spot away from a girl.
Exactly.
On a team. Very basic.
Yes.
You know, if you're in a competitive league, I don't think that it's fair that spot's being taken up by someone who has a physical advantage and a competitive edge and who is not a girl at that point. Right.
Yeah.
And I know that's going to, you know, ruffle a lot of feathers out there. But at the same time, you know, we have to understand that as women, we have fought so long and hard to have our own spaces, our safe spaces, our own teams, our own ability to be able to compete, and our own ability to have our own leagues. Like, why do we have women's leagues in the first place?
Exactly. And as mothers, this is a very important topic. Mothers who have daughters who are concerned about this, you know, who are saying, hey, wait a second, is my daughter going to get injured?
Oh yeah, there's stories of kids getting injured for sure. I mean, I can pull up some right now in the States in just in the last few years. In 2022, there was a North Carolina volleyball player named Peyton McNabb, and she's in the headlines right now. And she suffered a serious injury after being playing in a volleyball game. So this is at the competitive level, as I said, right? So a transgender athlete was on the other team, spiked a ball at her head. She's a year and a half after still having concussive symptoms.
Wow.
That's not usual. It can happen, certainly. But this is the type of thing that I would be worried about. I would be concerned about as a mother.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, there's incidents where even in the past year, there's a girls volleyball basketball team actually in the States as well, the Lowell girls basketball team in Massachusetts, who were playing against another team. The other team had a trans athlete, and three of their players were injured after encounters with this athlete, and were injured out of the game. Yeah. And so you're losing players through this game, and eventually they bowed out and they refused to play against this team.
Yeah.
Unfortunate, right? I mean, it of course makes news, and people are all up in arms about everything that has to do with being political, and not anything that has to do with
the safety
like
of our daughters,
of our kids.
And that's the thing, it immediately goes to political, immediately it goes to ideological, where all of a sudden you're just a bigot, or you're prejudiced, or you're not like realistically living in the modern world, right?
Or you're labeled you're immediately labeled as phobic.
Like phobic against what? Phobic against somebody destroying my daughter's collarbone? Like, really? I mean, that's the whole topic of conversation I'd like to have, where it's almost sensical. Like, we're coming back to common sense being common. Okay.
Right. Okay.
A boy playing against a girl. Okay. Let's just talk about me working out. Okay. And I told you about this. Like my husband and I work out.
Yeah.
I've been at it for like 6 months. He's been at it for like 6 weeks. Physically, he's just stronger than I am.
Yeah.
He is, he's able to get gains a lot quicker. He's able to eat a ton of food. I can't eat that food at all. Right. And I'm not going to challenge him to an arm wrestle. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though I probably have been working out longer and,
Yeah.
I am strong, don't get me wrong. And so is he, but I'm not going to challenge him to an arm wrestle. I will
Yeah.
get hurt. I will lose my arm.
Yeah.
Okay? This is the whole point of it all is that girls are girls.
Yeah.
And boys are boys. Physiologically, biologically.
Yeah, there are definite differences that show up, particularly when you're talking about sports and being competitive and sort of at that level of play. There, you're going to see the differences,
right?
For sure,
100%,
right? And there are going to be some real advantages for a trans athlete going into a girl's sport and a girls' 100%. Team, rather. Yeah.
So I feel like we've lost our common sense. We have. I mean, it's sad to say it. Like, we're both logical people.
Yeah.
We don't want to harm anybody. And apparently you can harm somebody with words a lot more these days, right? So the words that you choose are going to affect somebody's ability to appreciate you as an individual or a person. And they're automatically going to assume that we're probably, conservative, don't want to be open.
Right.
It's just not true. We just really honestly want to make sense of it all.
Well, and I think it's really important to be able to have reasonable conversations about things and not get so heated about it.
Yes,
like
100%.
Have a reasonable conversation. Say, this is my opinion. This is your opinion. Okay, so we're different. Where are the differences? We've talked about this before. Yeah. Where can you find the commonalities? Where can you find the differences? Where can you bridge the gaps?
Right.
That's it. It's very, very simple. And so, again, if you have an opinion, me as a mother, I don't think that I would have wanted my kiddo when she was 14 to be playing against a 14-year-old boy.
Yes.
In volleyball or basketball.
Yeah.
Right? Or get a ball to the head. Right? I don't, like, I can see the difference already in my son.
But even swimming, right? Like there's a swimmer.
Yeah, Leah Thomas. Yeah, and Riley Gaines. I mean, that's
just been on the headlines, right?
Yeah, it's been on the it's been going on for years. I think Riley Gaines has really been such a champion for women in sports, and commendable, because when she first started speaking out about this a few years ago, because she was a college swimmer. Leah was also a college swimmer. Leah had originally been competing as a man at a previous college, moved, started competing as a woman on a women's swim team, and Riley Gaines was competing against Leah. And so Leah's the first trans athlete or swimmer at that time to have won a championship, like an actual title at the college level. And so this was controversial. And, there are people on both sides of the aisle, arguing about this. Riley started speaking out about this, I believe, after she graduated. And the thing is, she has a right to believe, she has a right to have her opinion about it.
Yes.
Right. And she has a right to say, I don't agree with that. I had to go through this. None of you had to compete against someone who was faster, bigger, stronger than you.
Yeah. And,
it felt like an unfair playing field.
It's absolutely
that's the
unfair.
point.
Right?
Right?
I think about my daughter, because she swims and she's also a lifeguard, and
Right.
she also teaches children to swim.
Yeah.
I think of all the time that she's put into her craft.
Yeah.
And you think about all the time you put into your craft, you are swimming at a competitive level, and you're going to lose to somebody who is biologically superior to you.
Yeah.
And I hate to use that word, but it's true. Like, he's obviously faster. She's faster. And she, when she was competing against men, was...
She was doing okay. Like, she was
top
still...
six,
still doing well. But then, like, blows you away as competing in a women's sport.
That's how you win gold.
Right?
I don't know.
Oh
I mean, what do you say? Like, it's
I don't know.
A very controversial topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just think the only thing that I want to come and bring it down to is, if that was my daughter, what would I say?
Yeah. So, I mean, and for our listeners, what do you do? What would you do if that was your daughter?
Yeah.
On a team that she's worked so hard to get onto,
Yes.
worked so hard to be a part of, and gets, a ball to the head and is knocked out for the season.
Yeah.
For example.
And forget about that. Loses. And doesn't win first place, even though she technically is in first place.
Right.
Doesn't win.
Yeah.
Because
that's a hard
that
thing.
is the competition. It's unbeatable, unmatchable. Like you can't get there. There's a threshold you can't get to, right?
Yeah. And I think my other concern at that level is, and I know this is more of a personal thing, but I'm such a big proponent of, safe spaces for women.
Oh, the bathroom?
Yeah, changing in a change room with someone. And Riley talks about this very openly. They were all forced to change in the same change room together, and the girls on the team didn't have a say.
Oh, wow.
Right? And so, I mean, even things like that, that's something that I as a mother would have been pretty mortified to learn if my daughter, couldn't speak out about that or didn't have the option to say, I'm not comfortable with this. They were just kind of all said, no, you need to do this. You need to be inclusive to this person. Again, I'm not saying not to be inclusive, but can we find other options? Are people not allowed to have their opinions about it?
Right.
Are we not allowed to say, I'm not comfortable with that? Can we find some other solution? Like, none of that's happening because this is so politicized.
It is.
This is, always becomes something that you will maybe judge someone on. And then, of course, it colors everything else that you think about them.
So who's doing the judging, though?
Who do you think? Who is all online? Like, I don't know. Is it just the social media mob? Is it,
I think it's a group of people that are just offended by everything.
No.
Besides that, sorry, I know. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's okay.
You can't be overly offended by things that really are just not common sense. Like you can't be offended by this. Like to me, it's outrageous. I think it's outrageous that we're even having this discussion sometimes. I'm like, what? Where are we? Like, we were kind of born in a different time frame maybe. I want to be part of the modern world for sure. But if modernism, means that I have to like lose that common sense, I choose not to, then I'll go back to 1980 or 1985.
The 80s
when
were
things
pretty
made
fun.
So much more sense. But logically, I just don't think that we're going to accept this.
Yeah.
I just think, at the end of the day, we spoke about the pendulum kind of swinging in the other direction.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of pushback now.
Right? Like it just doesn't make sense. Yeah. And no matter how you try to push it, no matter how you try to make it fly, it does not make sense. There's no way it's going to be acceptable. I think right now, Leah is not allowed to go to the Olympics. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So she lost.
Biological males cannot do it any longer.
I want to say that that's for the Olympics and that's for swimming. I don't know specifically if that applies to every single sport and event.
Oh, I hope so.
There have been trans athletes that have competed in events, say in the 2020 Olympics. I think there was a weightlifter from New Zealand who won a medal, I believe. There have been other athletes. So I think right now it's a hot topic because there's a lot of scrutiny going on. There's a lot of, let's figure out what are our actual rules? Where are our boundaries? What are the rules? What are we now going to stick by? Because perhaps they weren't, delineated as well before, right? I mean, right now the NCAA is being sued by a dozen athletes in the States, including this is all to do with Riley Gaines and Leah Thomas. There's lawsuits coming. Like there are things that are happening now where people are wanting to draw an actual line.
Yeah.
Which I think is great in the sense of we need to know where everyone stands and we need to know what is reasonable, what are the rules that we should be following in sport.
Yeah.
Right. I just want everything to be transparent. If it is going to be a certain way, then we should all know what that way is. And then if you want to partake in that, then you do. And if you don't, then you don't.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think it's kind of like my husband watches a UFC, MMA, right? And watches boxing. And they do a weigh-in. Like, you're not going to have a 200-pound man fight a 160-pound man.
Sure.
Right? Like,
absolutely.
So you technically do a weigh-in.
Yep.
I think it should be the same for most sports, where you say to yourself, it's not necessarily a weigh-in, but it's kind of like, where is the fair playing ground here? Like, we're not going to have, Leah Thomas, who obviously, physically is obviously bigger and obviously is a lot more stronger, compete against someone, a female, right? So a biological female. So I think that's a fair assumption from a physical perspective. But then I constantly think, like, what is the alternative here? Yeah. Do we have like just transgender sports?
Maybe.
Just like a whole section altogether. I mean,
maybe.
Is that fair? I mean, how many transgender athletes are there? Is there enough to constitute having an entire, sport, or Olympics dedicated to them? I don't know. Yeah. But I mean, we do need to have something that makes a lot more sense than this.
I think some of the rules are more around when people transition. And so it gets into this whole other gray area of, well, if you have a kid that transitions pre-puberty, for example, like by age 12,
interesting,
and starts going on hormone blockers and doing the whole medicalization thing, which is a different story altogether, then maybe that levels the playing field a little more.
Does it stop all of the physiological aspects, like the hemoglobin, the muscle mass?
No, because boys and girls are born differently, right?
Exactly.
And they already have some predispositions. They are already biologically different, right? So I don't know if I don't imagine that would get rid of things in terms of level the playing field 100%. And again, it's one of those things where we haven't even really explored all of that.
Right. We haven't.
But then it would take us allowing, a whole generation of kids to transition first and then look at sports, and then, right, there's just so many other things. It opens such another can of worms. But I would say right now, I would agree that I think that there's an unfair advantage for teenagers, young men and women to be, competing in this way.
Yes.
And I don't understand. For me as a mother, I think I would very much worry if my daughter was on a team.
Yeah.
Where that's happening. And I see my son, he's 13, and he does play a competitive sport, and he trains with the girls who are also competing. Just from his physical stance alone, he can jump higher, he's faster, he's bigger, he's stronger already.
I know.
Right? That's not fair. I wouldn't put him on a girl's team and be like, go for it.
Yes.
That's not, I would consider that unfair.
Right.
Right? For him to be doing that. So I wouldn't like it on either end.
No. And I was watching a UFC fight, where it was one boxing match or another. Yeah. And there was one man against two women. I had mentioned that earlier. Yeah. And he was ruining them. He was pummeling both girls. It took two women to fight the one man. I think personally should have been 5-1 maybe.
5-1. Oh, that's hilarious.
That was insane.
Speaking of MMA though, there are a couple of MMA fighters that are transgender. I mean, the first one that was in the news was back in 2014. A fighter by the name of Fallon Fox, who is an MMA fighter, and she fought. There was this famous fight. She fought a contender named Tamika Brents.
Yes, I think I remember this.
Yes, yeah. This is a big and even Joe Rogan mentioned this on his show way back when. And he was talking about how he didn't appreciate that she didn't actually say that she was transgender. So she just entered as a woman and had never disclosed her previous history. And this is she's, in her 30s.
Really hurt somebody.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah. She broke her broke her orbital bone with a knee to the head. Girl, you know, Tamika had a concussion. Like this is serious, right? Like you can actually seriously injure somebody. So I know that was yeah, there was definitely a firestorm after that. Now again, I think if you're upfront about it and your competitor says, sure, I'm okay with that, that's a different story. Fair enough. You know what you're walking into, then you know, it's a fair fight if you both agree that that's okay.
Right.
Right. I think in this case, that was the first of a few where people were just like, oh my gosh.
This is what happens.
What's happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why I don't fight my husband. Like,
this
is why I don't arm wrestle him. Like,
yeah.
This is why.
Yeah. He'll really take your arm out. Oh my goodness.
You know?
Yeah.
It's to me, it's just preposterous, but I don't know. You know how I feel about all of this.
Yeah.
It's a tough conversation to have with just random people.
Yeah.
That's why we're having it on YouTube. Like really.
Right. Yes. For everyone to see.
For everyone to see.
And comment on. But it is a really touchy subject, right?
So touchy.
Like I'm really like compassionate about that. And people can have their opinions. I think you should be able to say how you feel and be able to have like a proper discourse and a proper discussion about it. And even if you agree to disagree, then that's fine. Agree to disagree.
Agree to disagree.
And go about your life.
Exactly.
Right?
And don't automatically think that makes us you know, all of these names that, you know, people run
whatever
through a
ism,
list of,
phobic,
like,
whatever thing.
So
yeah.
offensive.
Yeah.
So offensive. I don't.
You have things that you want to say. I see.
Offensive.
so offended. So
offensive. It's
oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's the new age, right? When you're thrown into this new age, and some of it is a bit of a curveball. So I want to implore parents, implore mothers, implore women to speak up. Because I think even if you want to believe that you're doing the right thing, I think you need to consider what that would mean for you. Consider what that mean for you. Consider what that mean for your daughters. Consider what that means for other women. Really and truly, you know, it's only one-sided. I've only seen it in the
one
female
direction.
Like, you know, like really. So have a conversation about it. Feel free to speak up about it. I think it's really important to have that conversation now. Because I don't know what direction we're going in. I see a little bit of pushback, so I'm seeing the pendulum swing, but I don't know who wins this fight. You know?
Yeah, I mean, is it a fight that we really have to win? I think it's something that we have to really like focus on, like preserving women's spaces and rights.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the preservation.
Because they're trying to take that away, right? We have to win that fight. We need our own space.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah. We do. I know. And that's just from like years of playing sports and realizing, you know.
This is true. You've really,
like that, realizing like the WNBA is not like the same as the NBA. Like we have to fight for recognition in sport. We already have had to deal with quite a bit to get where we're at. So, I'm all for women.
Yeah. We're always all for women, of course. Thanks so much for joining us today, guys. We will see you next time.